Carrie Geren Scoggins Political Newsletter, Bible Prophecy Times Edition Update. Many federal offices today are violating Christian civil liberties. They are illegally stigmatizing Christians as radicals, extremists, those that can't be trusted, those that need to be watched or surveillanced by law enforcement, and are being demonized, illegally violating separation of church and state. The state has to stay out of the church and cannot practice religious discrimination. It is a discriminatory act to demonize a religious group for their teachings. No aspect of Christianity can be called hate, and any attempts to try to censor them or to try to turn the masses against them, stirring up fear and ignorance, which are violating Christians' civil liberties and their protected class status under religion. Military, law enforcement, and many government agencies have violated Christian civil rights, trying to make Christians appear to be a group that can't be trusted, or a fringe group, or someone that should be watched by law enforcement as a possible terrorist, a homegrown terrorist, or some form of threat to the government. This is violating separation of church and state and is highly illegal. The separation of church and state is to keep the state out of the church. They cannot condone any particular religious belief or aspect of a religion, nor can they condemn one. They can't stigmatize a religious group. They can't demonize a religious group. They can't hunt a religious group with informants. They can't stalk them down, record them, and try to get something on them. It would be criminal intent and verging on a hate crime. Christians are protected class status. The hate crimes legislation covers them from being harassed for being Christian, coupled with laws and court precedents already set on what is abuse of a public office, states clearly that one cannot use a government position to strike out against a protected class, such as Christians. Even after the hate speech laws were overturned in the federal Supreme Court, and the Christians' legal right to debate the issue was upheld, many offices and those in law enforcement illegally sent out informants to try to set Christians up under some form of illegal sting operation against the churches, to record Christians, hoping to get them for hate speech, quoting Romans chapter 1. Of course, this violated separation of church and state and keeping the state out of the church, and was religious discrimination. No aspect of a religion can be demonized as hate or hate speech, including Romans chapter 1 of the King James Bible. And of course, since the federal Supreme Court supported the Christians' legal right to proselytize, spread the gospel, the entire Bible, or their specific group's beliefs, and supported their legal right to adhere to, quote, core values, which includes Romans chapter 1, and legislation was passed making sure that churches cannot be sued for discrimination of any protected class status, and the federal Supreme Court did not find a freedom from religion, as there is no freedom from religion. This shows that law enforcement violated separation of church and state and practiced anti-Christian religious discrimination, setting themselves up to be sued for discrimination, hate crimes, criminal intent, abuse of a public office, and separation of church and state. Some of the separation of church and state and religious discrimination practiced by law enforcement was the illegal use of informants being sent into the church to try to get something on the Christians. Because all of these acts that law enforcement, government agencies, and even our military has recently been practicing against Christians are illegal. The Christians can turn and sue for religious discrimination and win in the courtroom. It is imperative that every Christian document their online conversations, document their conversations at church. Keep up with what people are saying to you. Are they coming in pretending that there's guns around or violence, trying to play it up in front of you? Are they quoting back what's been said in your home because you're wiretapped and they're breaking wiretapping laws? Did they get a warrant to wiretap you? Note these kinds of activities, red flag them, and begin to prepare for court. If informants are trying to stigmatize or demonize your religious group as an extremist group or someone that should be watched, they will make references to preppers or guns or violence or bombings, any kind of outlandish radical behavior, or tempt you concerning scriptures on homosexuality, for example. Even though the hate speech laws have been overturned, and they have no legal grounds to do this whatsoever, many in law enforcement have overstepped their boundaries of law and are violating the rules in due process of law. This is not protocol. It's unprofessional behavior. It needs to be noted, documented, and prepare yourself for court for a discrimination suit against the state. Record the government informants. Always. Record all of your phone conversations, the conversations in your home, in your church, in your religious group, and especially if you are in a political religious group and are working on activism, as it's been noted that the NSA and IRS admitted to illegally targeting the Tea Party, Republicans, and the religious right. Make sure to cover yourself for court. Again, their activities are illegal and document it because you will win in the courtroom. The abuse of a public office, separation of church and state violations, anti-Christian religious discrimination, anti-Christian hate crimes has gone on for so long in our government and law enforcement that it's become standard procedure in their mind, though their activities are illegal. It is only now that there is a Christian civil rights movement underway. Prepare for court and get ready for the battle in the courtroom. You need recordings. You need to document the informants that contact you online, saving your emails, and it's good to use your snippet. If you have that option under your accessories on your computer to save your conversations online, if there's any anti-Christian harassment, any insults being passed at you, or they're trying to frame you for being a prepper or a survivalist or a gun nut, just remember, document everything for court. And Christians, teach your children and your church and your activists to get more politically active, more active in writing the media, letter writing. It has a profound effect on a civil rights movement such as this Christian civil rights movement that is underway now. Plan protests. Talk to your elected leaders. That's what they're there for. Talk to the law enforcement. Keep the lines of communication open in discussing Christian civil rights and Christian civil rights violations. Make sure these kinds of activities aren't going on where they're skulking under rocks doing such things and hiding it from the rest of the police department. Bring it out into the light. As well as if someone's Christian civil rights as an employee are being discriminated against by management, the owners, other employees, make sure that those type of activities are brought to light and prepare for a lawsuit if necessary. Again, the Federal Supreme Court did not find a freedom from religion. There is no freedom from religion. You have the legal right to adhere to Christian, quote, core values. which do include Romans chapter 1. You cannot be fired, discriminated against, or arrested for adhering to biblical moral standards, including Romans chapter 1 and scriptures on homosexuality. Any act therein to violate this infringes upon your Christian civil rights. Be ready to file suit. Document everything. If someone is terminated from their job, or given a warning, or they're being harassed at work, or law enforcement is trying to set you up for this, or you feel you're being discriminated against, record the conversation and get ready for court. Document it. Get as much as you can in writing, especially if it's on the job. Make sure the employers put in writing for your attorney what the infraction was, making sure that it's noted for court of an anti-Christian policy. If you're not involved in the Christian civil rights movement yet, start today. Start letter writing, the media, your elected representatives, federal, state, and local, contacting the local law enforcement, federal offices, state offices, keeping Christian civil rights issues before the public's eyes and ears. The profound effect that it has on government, law enforcement, legislation, our legislators, our government leaders, down to how Christians are treated on the job, will all be a direct result of activism by those in the Christian civil rights movement. Using social media as a tool to contact your representatives, legislators, and political leaders, as well as the media, is a good choice for political activism. If your social media provider discriminates against your Christian political viewpoints, since the hate speech laws were overturned in the federal Supreme Court by law, social media providers have to adhere to the federal Supreme Court ruling that you have the legal right to, quote, debate the issues. You have the legal right to take an opposing viewpoint to what mainstream society says. This includes scriptures on Romans chapter 1, biblical scriptures on homosexuality, not being offensive, but quoting the Bible. These actions are fully legal. If you are discriminated against in any way concerning this, prepare to file suit. The federal Supreme Court supported and upheld the Christian's legal right to proselytize and to adhere to, quote, core values. This includes your social media. Make sure that your Christian civil rights are not being violated and that any business, employer, or government agency, including law enforcement and military, are not violating these civil rights. The federal Supreme Court upheld these rights for you. Demand that they adhere to them. Again, noting that calling any aspect of the Bible or your personal religious beliefs hate or hate speech is religious discrimination. Your legal rights to not suffer discrimination should be upheld in the courtroom. Again, prepare for court. For those in the ministry, remember the core values hearings in the federal Supreme Court surrounding the Boy Scouts refusing to hire homosexual scout leaders or allowing homosexuals into their group covers all Christian ministries and religious groups. You have the legal right now, by federal Supreme Court precedent, to adhere to your religious core values, including Romans chapter 1, in who you hire on, who you allow in the ministry, and who you allow in your denomination or church or religious group, as well as the legislation passed stating that Christians cannot be sued for violating someone's protected class status. This is the law, and it protects you, the Christian. The hate speech laws were overturned in the federal Supreme Court, and they upheld our legal rights to debate the issue. This includes Bible scriptures such as Romans chapter 1, as well as the federal Supreme Court upheld our legal right to adhere to, quote, core values. Legislation was passed into law that churches and religious groups cannot be sued for discrimination of violating anyone's protected class status. The federal Supreme Court upheld the Christian's legal right to proselytize or to spread the gospel, and they never found a freedom from religion. Christians are a federally protected class under religion. They have protected class status. Our founding fathers quoted the Bible a documented 15,000 times while they stood on government lands making our laws and sessions. They were on government land, and they were government employees at the time. Our founding fathers also opened and closed every session, making our laws with prayers unto God. Some were deists, some were agnostic, most were Christian. They expected tolerance from those that opposed their viewpoints. Censorship is the opposite of religious tolerance. You're not a libertarian until you support the legal rights of those that you despise. That includes Christian civil rights. The federal Supreme Court saw this and saw that the Founding Fathers' intent was not a freedom from religion. There is no freedom from religion. This has been another edition of Carrie Geren Scoggins' Political Newsletter, Bible Prophecy Times Edition Update. Look for more information. Carrie Geren Scoggins' Political Newsletter and Carrie Geren Scoggins' Political Newsletter, Bible Prophecy Times Edition, Facebook pages and bloggers.